Season-long fantasy football drafts are here, so let's talk about some Jaguars that you guys may be interested in drafting. Now, before I get into this video, I wanted to shout out Underdog Fantasy for partnering with me. Now, thank you to everybody that used my promo code and joined my leagues. I was able to fill up 6 different fantasy football leagues this year, best ball leagues, thanks to you guys. Now, if you missed out, there's plenty of different drafts that you can join. I just probably won't be in it. If you go to the website, use the promo code UCFJAG, it'll double your deposit up to $100, and it's all best ball leagues. You can participate in anything such as Best Ball Mania 4, where there's up to $15 million of prizes to give out. Some other things you may be able to do right now is that there is season-long player pick'ems. I basically put a 5 different player projection on there. I put $50 down on higher lowers on 5 different players, and if I cash in, then and if all those players hit, I get $1,000. So pretty exciting. There's also going to be daily fantasy sports on there too, for your weekly fantasy football. Now, if you guys are interested in this, use my promo code UCFJAG to join. And with all that said, let's get into this video. Now, in this video, we'll go position to position and kind of talk about different players that are options at these spots. We'll start off with quarterback. Now, Trevor Lawrence is currently getting drafted at quarterback 8 in underdog leagues. He is after Fields and after Burrow and Herbert, and also before Deshaun Watson, Tua, and Anthony Richardson. Now, a few years ago, my strategy when it comes to quarterbacks was I like to string quarterbacks. I used to find guys late and then find different guys based on matchups that I would like to play. But it seems like quarterbacks are different nowadays. There is a big gap between the top quarterbacks and the next kind of tier of quarterbacks. Now, I kind of have a list of acceptable quarterbacks. There's a list of quarterbacks that I say, okay, these are the quarterbacks that I'd be willing to have, and I don't accept anybody out of it. Now, I know with Trevor Lawrence, he may not have the upside of Justin Fields, Jackson, or Jalen Hurts because he doesn't really have the rushing kind of capabilities that they have. Trevor Lawrence can run the ball, but that's really not a huge part of his game. But, Burrow is not a very mobile guy, and he's able to, finish as a top 3 fantasy quarterback. So it's not something that you necessarily need. But I know last year when I came in, I don't usually draft quarterback that early, but last year in one of the leagues I wound up looking at the board and saying, look, I don't like really any of these wide receiver running backs, and I wound up taking Patrick Mahomes as the first quarterback off the board, and I actually won the league. So there's a bunch of different strategies when it comes to how you attack your quarterbacks. And I'll tell you this, I think Trevor Lawrence will be a great option as your QB1. Going as quarterback 8, he has quarterback 1 capabilities. I mean, he can go out there and fire on all cylinders, but he's not going to have the rushing upside. But I think if Trevor Lawrence is your quarterback 1 going into the season, you're going to be in pretty good shape. I just wouldn't draft him too early. I'm in some drafts with Jags fans, and he's going off the board in the first rounds. Don't be that guy, but I think that he'll be a pretty good play on your fantasy leagues. Now, next we'll talk about running backs. Now, Travis Etienne is currently running back 14, and Tank Bigsby is running back 42. Now, Etienne does scare me a little bit because, look, the Jaguars drafted Tank Bigsby in the 3rd round. And the big reason they drafted Tank was because they didn't think we were good enough running the ball really in like short yardage situations and in the red zone. And when you look at Travis Etienne, Travis Etienne is really good between the 20s. And look, he's going to be really, really good when it comes to getting a lot of rushing yards. But if you have a running back, you want the touchdowns to go on top of that. 1 touchdown is equal to 60 rushing yards, so you kind of see the importance of that. And, Etienne also, even going back to college, he hasn't been the greatest in the passing game. Look, they tried to use him a little bit early in the season in a passing game. They kind of went away from it because maybe they thought they were putting a little bit too much on his plate. But I think that Tank Bigsby is going to kind of be a touchdown pest for, Travis Etienne. So I would definitely use caution when it comes to drafting Travis Etienne. Now, he is running back 14, so it's not like he's going in the top 10. But I would caution if you want to move up Travis Etienne in your running back rankings, just be cautioned that, hey, like, it may not be a split backfield, but they're going to give Tank Bigsby some real opportunities to score some touchdowns. And they drafted him in the in the third round. So they definitely have really, really high plans and expectations for Tank Bigsby, in that respect. Now, next is to a very exciting spot for fantasy when it comes to the Jaguars, and that's the wide receiver position. Look, we have Calvin Ridley going as running back or wide receiver 14, according to Underdog Fantasy. Christian Kirk is wide receiver 27, and Zay Jones is wide receiver 57. Now, I'm extremely bullish on Ridley. Like, I legitimately think that Ridley is going to finish as a top 5 wide receiver this year in fantasy. Ridley, when you look at the game against the Cowboys, when a bunch of guys are running slants, he's the first guy that Trevor Lawrence looks at. And I have a feeling that, when Trevor Lawrence, when he looks up at the field, doesn't really like a defense. And, he's going to be looking at Calvin Ridley a bunch to bail him out. He's also going to be a vertical threat. He's going to be a big time possession receiver too when it comes to just getting him the ball. I think high receptions, high yardage, high touchdowns for Calvin Ridley. This is definitely a guy that I'm targeting. And I think wide receiver 14, I mean, look, I think that's pretty much a steal if you want to go on him. Now, next up is Christian Kirk. And now Christian Kirk is a little bit tricky. Last year when he was a Jaguars wide receiver 1, he disappeared in quite a few games. He started off really, really strong and then kind of tailed off toward the end of the year. Then Evan Ingram kind of stepped up, kind of stole some of his targets away. And one thing that you saw in the last game against the Cowboys is the Jaguars actually ran a lot of 13 personnel. 1 running back, 3 tight ends. And when they did that set, it was Christian Kirk coming out the field, not Zay Jones. So you wonder how much that's going to affect next year because, Christian Kirk had like 80 to 90% of snaps this year for the Jaguars offense. If he's coming off on 13 personnel, and if that's something that the Jaguars want to run a lot, then, some of his production may dip a little bit. And especially when the Jaguars want to commit a little bit more to the run, maybe some touchdowns get taken away from him in that respect. So I know for me, I'm probably fading Kirk a little bit. As much as I'm like increasing Calvin Ridley, I'm probably decreasing Christian Kirk a little bit. And then, there's also different guys all around that'll be, getting targets. And especially with, Evan Ingram also kind of playing that slot role, there's going to be looks for Evan Ingram too. Now, the final wide receiver we'll talk about is Zay Jones. And I think when it comes to best ball, Zay Jones is a tremendous option because Zay Jones truly has explosion games. He's big time boomer bust. There's games where he might only have 2 receptions, and there's games where he has over 10 receptions, 150 yards, several touchdowns. Based on the type of matchups that they get, the Jaguars are not afraid to go after Zay Jones. And, like I said, Zay Jones stays on the field in those 13, personnel sets. And we saw later in the year, Zay Jones has the ability to go deep. So, he's a guy that, look, if you're in a pinch and once you get into the bye week season, I would, I think that Zay Jones could be a pretty good, late option for you. It's just right now, the wide receiver and pass catcher room is pretty crowded with, Ridley, Kirk, Etienne, Ingram. You can even throw, maybe Strange or Bigsby in that area. And, there's a lot going on there. But I do think the Jaguars will be passing the ball a lot. So Zay Jones, maybe not a week in, week out starter, but I think if you find a good situation where, it makes sense to play him, I wouldn't really be afraid to. Now, finally, we'll talk about tight ends. Now, the only tight end to really target is Evan Ingram. I know the Jaguars just drafted Britton Strange in the second round of the 2023 draft, but historically, it takes a little bit of time for tight ends to really get going. Not many of them have great rookie seasons, and Britton Strange is really out here just blocking like crazy. That he's really helping out in the run game, and I don't know how much of a fantasy impact he's going to have. Evan Ingram's currently going as tight end 8, and look, when it comes to tight ends in fantasy football, like Kelsey is like at the top, and there's just a huge gap between him and tight end 2. I mean, literally, Kelsey is going the top 5 at fantasy drafts, which is unheard of when it comes to fantasy football for when tight ends get drafted. But he is there, and he's got Patrick Mahomes. They're basically best friends on the field, so it's a pretty crazy duo between them two. Now, the best thing about Ingram is that, look, he had a really, really strong end to last season. At the beginning of the season, he was used a good amount, but it wasn't until really the end where they started finishing off where like Evan Ingram started putting in monster games and Trevor Lawrence and him really started to connect. And then now you look at it and look, he's back under a 3-year contract. Now it feels like the tight end room is really, really solidified now with a guy in Evan Ingram that, has a long-term deal. You have Britton Strange in here has 4 more years left on the Jaguars. And, Luke Farrell, 6th-round pick from 2021, is now going into his 3rd year. You got to think that Doug Peterson feels pretty good about the tight end room and, really the roles in here. So, those are some different players and stuff to target in fantasy football for the Jaguars. I really hope this video helped you out. If you guys are interested in playing fantasy football, definitely download the Underdog app. Use my promo code UCFJAG to double your deposit up to $100. And there's all kinds of different leagues for you to join. You can even create leagues and invite your friends. If you guys want to do that, create a league and want to invite me, I'm more than willing to come join you. Lots of cool stuff going on over there. So yeah, you can join a league for as low as $3. But thank you guys so much for watching this video. Please drop a like for me if you can, and go Jags.